Welcome to Practicing Failure, where we learn about mental health, celebrate mistakes, and explore how failure helps us grow. I'm your host, Dr. Amanda Castle, and I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Dr. LaMisha Hill-Weller. Dr. Hill-Weller is a licensed counseling psychologist originally from the Chicagoland area who completed her doctorate in counseling psychology from the University of Oregon. Dr. Hill-Weller has been working at the University of California, San Francisco since 2013. She currently serves as an associate professor and the inaugural vice chair for equity, inclusion, and structural change within their department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Services. Anchored in the Spirt of Service, Dr. Hill-Weller works collaboratively to help individuals and organizations move toward their values of inclusion. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Hill-Weller.
Hello, Dr. Castle.
Hello.
It is so good to see you again, to be with you again. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I feel like every few years we get the chance to come together, and it's such a treat. And so thank you for joining.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell your listeners about how we met?
Sure.
We connected?
We worked together on internship at UC Riverside.
Yeah.
Oh my God, so long ago now.
We were 2012.
2012.
2012. Yeah.
We were babies. But we went through a lot together and we learned a lot together. And I will say, I learned a lot from you during that time. And I was very thankful for our friendship and our work together.
Yeah, likewise. It was a very formative year. It's one of those times in people's lives, people are like, if they're wondering, like, you remember, if you know a year in your life where you can almost feel like you can recall every single day, because that's how dynamic every day was.
Yeah.
That was our year at Riverside, so many days, even, I remember eating lunch outside the first day.
Yep.
And,
I remember watching shows on our lunch during like the winter.
Oh, yes. We used to watch like different Netflix and different things. Oh my goodness.
Just pretend like stuff was not happening for an hour.
Yeah. I will say, I think the weather in Riverside probably really offset a lot of the stress.
It helped. It was nice.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always registered, and I think part of what I learned from you is how to think more on a systems level, because it's something you're very good at. And so I'm excited to talk to you today because you have now over a decade of really high-level systems experience. And that's something that I don't know if our listeners are aware, but there's a lot of psychologists who don't go into therapy directly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're a great example of this.
That's a function of a little bit of practicality in the job market, but also
Fair.
Like how do you leverage your skills in other directions? And so for your listeners who are professionals, whether it's mental health or in other capacities, I think that there's always an opportunity to think about what is it that I do in a really tangible way that might fit into other or adjacent spaces.
I love that. So there's two big topics in your work that we're going to kind of work through. One being the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Uh-oh.
I know.
Can you say that?
I'm going to. I'll lose my federal funding, which is none.
No, I mean, for the listeners, it's really not. It's funny and not funny, right?
It's
like,
yeah.
Are these trigger words? Are they forbidden words? Is this like living in a dystopian novel in some ways?
Truly. The science pulls us out of the political spectrum into things that are very practical, which is what you can speak to. I think you're uniquely suited to speak to it. So we're going to dip our toes in this. And I will just tell my listeners, my planning for this podcast occurred last fall.
Oh, wow. This one in particular?
Just the whole concept.
Oh, the whole concept. Okay.
But each of my episodes are now turning into things that are much more relevant than I thought they would be. So here we are.
Yeah.
And then we're going to switch gears into growth mindset, because that's something you use a lot in your work, and something that's really, whether we're using it on a systems level or an individual level, such a valuable way to grow and move through life in ways that help us be more functional and move toward our goals rather than getting stuck in unhelpful patterns. So let's start with the hot button stuff because, why not?
All right, let's dive in.
Your career has centered around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've already said this, but it's something you're uniquely gifted in. Your ability to see the needs of others, respond to them, but also how you can then see the systems in the bigger picture. Because how we intervene and help an individual is very different than how we're thinking about groups. So when you're working with a company or a department around matters of inclusion, what are some of the common themes that you're sort of observing before you dig in and start doing your work? What are you paying attention to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate you kind of acknowledging that it's a gift. I never really thought about it that way. But one of the things that I do think about in this work and why I think it either calls or amplifies a lot of people from different resilient identities is that in so many ways and I'll just speak from my own lived experiences as a Black woman growing up in, majority white and homogenous environments, it's kind of a requirement of survival. I'm just going to be very honest. It's a survival skill of how do I navigate these spaces, even in childhood? How do I navigate the playground, right? And figure out where I can be welcomed, where I have legitimate allies like yourself, and where are the ways in which I need to think thoughtfully about the dynamics that I might be experiencing so that I don't internalize them as an experience unto myself, right? So whether it was sort of the racism or, it's like ordinary kid stuff can turn racial real quick. So it can be this really like someone's not getting along and that's just a kid thing, right? And then it can turn into something totally different. It's like, where did that come from? Is that how that person really feels? Is that something that they saw on TV? Did they learn it at home? And in a way, even as a kid, I was doing a lot of these mental gymnastics of what's really happening here. And is this something that I need to protect myself from? Is this something that I can give a little bit of grace around? Or like I said, how do I navigate through that? So I think oftentimes that is what you're seeing. And I think a lot of people of color spend so much time in their own life, kind of examining and figuring it out. And then we are in some ways, I would say this is like diversity 1.0 of, I think the attempt to center the lived experiences of others often was, voyeuristic in a way. It's like, so it's, X Heritage Month or cultural celebration or Pride or whatever the case may be. Tell us about what your experiences of that are, but often from a place of trauma, of pain, of overcoming. And I think that it is understandable that people were curious about those things.
But also they want to feel good. So tell me a story that makes me feel like I contributed to this and I feel good and hopeful. Yeah. And then we go back to living the way that we're comfortable living.
Yes. But in that work and in that kind of 1.0 version, I think a lot of folks from resilient identities got more skill in talking through these dynamics, talking through their own experiences. And that's sort of whether it is sort of a spectrum of harm into trauma, or whatever in life, it's like, I think that one of the pushbacks that we hear in a lot of equity and inclusion work is like, I'm just not good at it, or you say it so well, or, I just don't know what to say. And that's actually a function of folks not having, whether it's the privilege or the opportunity to kind of sit on the sidelines and not have to practice their own personal narratives in those ways. So it's part of it is just practice. And I think that we get a lot of practice at it.
Yeah. And in the theme of this podcast, we're going to fail when we practice it. And I look back in my own history and I see where lots of examples of how I failed in that domain. And honestly, I'm so thankful for the friends that I've had over the years who have helped gently guide me into thinking and engaging with it differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to get on topic because you asked me a question about like, what does this look like within the workplace?
Right. What are you
systems?
observing?
Yeah. What am I observing? And I think that coming back to this idea of like, what are your professional skills and how might you leverage that? So for the listeners who are in the mental health field or who maybe are psychologists and trainees, et cetera, I think being trained in an ecological model is something that I am grounded in. And it actually is sort of a lens in the way in which I often interpret a lot of the interactions that I am observing. And so I think in the same way that when I said, like, as a kid, it's like ordinary kid stuff can turn into something totally different. And that's true within the workplace as well. So when you think about the ecological model, the individual being in the center of a number of
can you define the ecological?
Yeah, so it's sort of like this nested circle. If you think about sort of a gobstopper, so to speak, kind of diagram, right? Where, the center circle is the individual. And then the next circle around them might be the kind of networks and communities that they are most connected to. So it could be family systems. It could be church and other religious spaces. It could be schools, depending on their age. It could be their professional working environments or their direct teams, right?
So sort of places and people that we interact with every day.
Exactly. And then the next system around that, I'm probably not going to get it all in perfect order, but so there's the next systems around that. So different structures, hierarchies. Okay. So now I'll just say, we're talking about professional spaces. So you might work within a smaller team, but my team is nested inside of a department that's nested inside of a university that's nested inside of other things. Right. And then you have another layer of our systems and our policies that can impact those spaces. So whether it's the federal government or the state and local government says, hey, you are now required to take this implicit bias training, which is something that I'm trying to curate right now, for a team, which is like, okay, so now I'm required to do this thing, or to think about this thing. How do I sort of respond to those policies and those practices? And then most broadly is sort of the macro system, which is sort of thinking about the culture, right? Mm-hmm. And that might pivot from what part of the world you might be in, but there is a broader kind of larger macro influence. And I think when we think about this idea of culture wars, it's really impactful right now. So kind of using that framework to sort of see what's happening in team dynamics in the workplace. It's really interesting because you have an individual who has their own lived experiences, and oftentimes they're then interacting either with a single person, right? Could be, a one-to-one conflict, with a manager or supervisor, or it could be some broader conflicts within sort of the culture and the climate, or it could be a policy that's not working for them. Say it's an accessibility policy. And maybe they need accommodations, but their workplace and their team members are not understanding. So it can take something that could be really, really small or can seem small, like, this person, this person never does the after hours required activities, right? And it could be that this person has other needs that maybe, aren't shared openly within the workplace. Maybe that's related to family. Maybe they can't drive at night, due to vision or something, you don't know what's going on. There's so many, you could go in any, and I'm just kind of tossing out these examples of like, it could be this, it could be that, right? Just to get people to see when you think about diversity, it's not just about race and ethnicity. So I think in our Western American culture, diversity has become a proxy for race and ethnicity, but it really, as a field of study and as an operating domain within sort of that diversity, equity, and inclusion in that tagline, it encompasses so many themes, right?
It really does. And I think even as you were listing the possibilities as why somebody might not be able to attend after work meetings, I picture all of these reasons that might pop up that are legitimate, but that once you list a reason in a professional setting, people sometimes see that as, well, now it's open to negotiation. Well, it's probably not that hard to drive at night, or you can take an Uber, or we can fix this for you. And maybe that's not the full picture. Maybe that's not the actual... Yeah, there's lots of reasons why we don't want other people kind of meddling with our lives and telling us why we can fix things and live them the way that they want us to live. That kind of removes autonomy.
Right. right? So at the individual level, I would say when people are having challenges in the workplace, there's a really tricky dynamic of like, how do you maintain what you said, autonomy, privacy? I think sometimes confidentiality, as we understand the term, is very, very hard to do, especially in group settings.
Mm-hmm.
So part of my work is always really asking and requesting and creating like these community agreements around privacy. Because especially in healthcare, one of the things that I've noticed is that in the setting that I now am close to, which I was never in like a hospital setting before until most recently, until my job changed, but it makes sense that people spend, I mean, in a hospital setting, people are on 12-hour shifts, right? And so they spend a lot of time in these places. And it's understandable that maybe their close network of friends at work or close colleagues are the people that they are engaged in communication with, right? And I would say that there's a really special quality of, I would say, this, as people that do interpersonal work, like we got to be good talkers. So
yes, we do.
Or good listeners, or both. Like it's got to be, you're somewhere in the middle of this, like you're either talking or you're listening, doing some of the both. And I would say that in healthcare, you have a lot of folks, especially within like the nursing culture, they are really good talkers. Like, whether you think about other industries that are like have good conversation, usually it's like, whether in the beauty industry, whether hair or barber shops, right? These places where like this gift of like talking and conversation.
It puts people at ease. Mm-hmm. It reduces tension. Like nurses have to be so good at like PR and public relations. Yes. It's the same thing.
Yes. And I think that like, especially when I think about like, what are the challenges when I can speak to is like this idea of, or this dynamic of when communication becomes second, third hand, when it becomes triangulated, and when a single issue can then get layered into a really complex situation based on identity, the identities of the other people involved. When you're operating in a hierarchy, there's power dynamics, there's privilege.
So people are not always playing this game.
Right, exactly.
They're playing three-dimensional chess, and that changes how we communicate, our motivations behind our communication, and that's felt throughout that web of connection.
Yeah. So oftentimes people will be able to say like, oh, something's not right, or, you can feel it in the, this is the intuition, right? In terms of, I think as a psychologist, this is the other thing that we can bring in these spaces, is that oftentimes I'm just actually wanting to sit and feel people. And in their energy. And I don't even know if we're actually, I don't know how explicitly you were trained in this, like the noticing of like, how does the breath shift? How does the eye contact shift? How does the body language shift? How do you hang on to a word and a pause in a moment where you're like, ooh, something just happened right there.
That was communication, even though it wasn't verbal. They're sending signals of something.
Right. So we're always kind of in this really delicate way, like weaving this very gentle tapestry with a person. And it's not always just like, oh yeah, someone told me exactly what their problem was. No, we're like in there, like trying to like, we're in a spirit of curiosity because we don't know for sure, but it is an invitation to point to, was there an emotion behind that word? What are you feeling right now? And so even within these kind of dynamic spaces, and I'm not an organizational psychologist, but I think that when you come into organizations, when you bring yourself as a psychologist, you are attenuating to all of these dynamics. What's the thing on the surface? What's the easy kind of obvious best answer? And then now how can I understand that from a different lens or from multiple lenses? And what might be true in all of these ways just to help? Because it's not always, as you know, about solving a problem. It can be about raising awareness and understanding because oftentimes there isn't a solution. Right?
Yeah. And in that, a lot of what you describe is also what we use in therapy and in our interpersonal relationships. How do we build empathy? Like we can't always fix things for people. But being understood, being cared for, being valued helps us endure quite a bit.
Right, right. I think that this pushback around, I don't quite understand it. I do and I don't. I do and I don't. Because as a psychologist, we operate from this principle of meeting people where they are at.
Yes.
And so let's just use an example of substance use, and motivational interviewing, right? And so we think about, okay, we know someone has a significant problem, but they're not quite ready to acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
So they came in and okay, so they took a first step. They're here. And we know that there's this other elephant in the room, but right now they kind of want to talk about, I don't know, the relationship or what, some
right.
other somewhat proximal, like it's there, right? It's real. We have to meet them where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
You have to build that relationship.
That might be, I'm going to test a smaller problem with you to see if this is helpful before I risk this immense vulnerability that I might not be ready to actually deal with.
Yeah.
And that's legitimate. And if we blow past that, that ruptures the relationship. That's not going to be productive for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I feel there's a lot of different angles in which you could come to, like, why is there so much pushback around DEI? I think that it is not really well understood.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Right? I think that there has been this interpretation that it benefits a few people at the expense, and this is the zero-sum game, that it benefits a few people at the expense of others.
Yes.
Which I would say is a misinterpretation. And there is this piece of discomfort, right? And I think that's where when I show up in this work, I tend to be very gentle around. Because in a team setting, and this is a values place, like everybody, if I'm asked or invited to come do a workshop or do a presentation, everybody in that space, I'm responsible to, right?
Everybody.
In an equal way. Everybody. Mm-hmm. Everybody. And so I really navigate that both and so when someone, might share, as we've heard, like, this is the whatabouts, right? If I get a what about, but what about? What about? You fill in the blank, but what about? It is an ask to be seen. And so if I am to not respond to that person and hold space for them, even in a millimicro 5-second manner, if I dismiss, ignore, shut down, if I create or cause harm, that's not helpful.
I love how you're framing this, because I think there is a lot of historical anger against certain demographics, earned historical anger. And yet when we bring in that what about, like, those are still humans. And how do we engage with them in a way that moves the conversation forward? Not everyone is in a position where they can do that. And I want to acknowledge, like, I'm not asking everybody to go out there and just emotionally take care of people who are in positions of privilege. But there are individuals in leadership roles, in our professional careers, in public service. Like, this is something they need to figure out how to do.
Yeah. And, and I know that I want to come back and shape this piece that you said about, like, the historical experiences, around demographics or identities. And I think the real intention is for people to see these moments and to understand the great harm that occurred. And when it is a personal, like a one-to-one harm, have some accountability.
Yes.
And oftentimes there is sort of this kind of harm that is just present. And it's, how do we hold space for that experience without feeling, and if we are feeling touched by it, how do we not interpret that as, I'm now being made to feel shame? And I wonder if that's the other part, right? Because as someone who has a different lived experience and identity, it is not often that I encounter the emotion of shame.
Mm.
And so this conversation is making me wonder, do we need to do more work around helping people understand what is this emotion of shame?
I 100% think so.
Yeah, I feel like ultimately, this pushback against DEI is so layered. And I wish it wasn't caught up in a culture war. I wish that there could be understanding and an opportunity to say, hey, you know what, maybe this approach didn't work for our organization. Mm-hmm. Maybe doing a workshop or training this way, didn't quite meet our needs, or we didn't lay the foundation well enough. We needed a little bit more team building before as one of my mentors says, small talk before big talk, right? Mm-hmm. So if you don't have conversations about anything, how are you going to go in and have this deeply impactful conversation?
Now let me poke at your deepest vulnerabilities. Yeah, exactly. And everyone should be okay with this.
Exactly. So you never know. And I would say that especially around the equity and inclusion in the military, that's kind of baffling to me in some ways. But at the same time, it's like, but it's an example, I think, that I interpret of like people not making the case for the organizational importance, right? So how does equity and inclusion actually support professional spaces? Well, you might need to tweak the message based on what you do and who you serve and how you approach those things, right?
Yeah. I mean, that gets into one of my questions of like, how do we frame it so that people understand, like, when it comes to capitalism, having good policies around inclusion makes your company more effective. It's going to earn you more money. Mm-hmm. That's a goal that everyone can get behind, regardless of their demographic. In capitalism, people want to make more money. Here's a pathway to do that.
And especially in capitalism, I think that you should be able to see it in the and perspective, right? So this issue around Target, right? Right?
Great example.
So Target's a great example. And I think that people started to finally vote with their dollars. It's not a store that I personally ever shopped at a whole lot. I always felt like it was a little overpriced.
Fair. It's right in my demographic.
It is overpriced. It is overpriced, and you can get the same thing at Walmart for less. Mm-hmm. However, depending on where you live, like the Walmart shopping experience in certain spaces in the country is very different than in others.
Very true.
Just like Planet Fitness can be a very different experience in some spaces than others. Like, I'll just put that out there. It's like known to be the gym that is like, oh, this is where all like the misfits are like playing on the jungle gym as opposed to like working out. You know what I'm talking about. But I've gone to a Planet, my family's from the South, and so I went to a Planet Fitness in a small town in the South, and I was like, oh, this is really great. Like, there were people from all different ages and generations there, parents there with their kids, there were seniors in the gym, and it's like, and if there wasn't, and it almost felt like a community center, like almost like a YMCA vibe. Right?
That's beautiful.
And I was like, this Planet Fitness is awesome. Like, and it makes sense because it's accessible. It's price point wise, everything about it like made so much sense. And it was just where it was located, everything about it. And then all the people that went there were across, all different identities and was representative of the communities that they lived in. I was like, oh, this is a totally different experience than like walking into one. And I was like, oh, walk right out, right? But I say all that to say, okay, coming back to Target. So this issue about where you spend your dollars, I think that in the past, Target has had some great campaigns, and I feel like they have been known for like the best Pride gear that comes out every year in June.
Which then pissed off a different demographic.
Well, and this is a good point, because the small outposts of rainbow and colorful clothing and accessories did not take away from all of the other things that were still available to everybody else. So this is the boat. So this is this perception of the zero-sum game. If I do something for one group, does that mean that I get less for another group? No, because usually it's an addition. It's an add-on, and it's a place where they can make more revenue. generate more revenue at a particular time of year. That's why everybody does, right now we're in the Easter holiday season. So that's why there's specific, everything's pastels, everything's Easter focused, right? So they are generating more revenue based on a certain time of year. Halloween, Christmas, Valentine's Day, call it what you want, right? And Pride just happens to be, I would say, an extension of that. And if you wanted to include, Latinx Heritage Month and Black History Month and whatever else that pops up that people are like, yeah, I would really I would really spend some extra dollars if, you had an outpost for, Hanukkah or whatever the other case may be. Like, it could be a trend, and it could be something that, and it could be such a trend that people from other communities might also purchase and buy into.
Might come to the store that wouldn't normally come to the store.
Right. Might pick up an item, might learn something about a community or culture and find, purpose and understanding and awareness building. So there's a way to go about it and doing it that I think can be really, really helpful and can meet within the model of profit. Well, you call it capitalism, you could just call it, revenue generating, expanding, the business, however you want to think about sales marketing. It's all there. But I think the quick pivot was, I think what it showed a lot of people was that there wasn't real commitment there. And yeah, I think that people are starting to get back to this collective voice. And when I think people can vote with their dollars. Do you, boo? Like I said, it's never been a store I shopped at a whole lot. They do have one of the best Easter holiday candy outpost, I will say, as someone who really appreciates candy. Target always has like the full selection. But no, I will not be. I never shop there a lot anyway, so.
Yeah. And it gets into if we can attract more dollars from whatever direction, that's appealing. I think a lot of companies leaned into that in the last 5 to 8 years. But then what happens when a group decides we are angry that others are being included?
I do not understand, because this is layered in a few different ways. And it's really interesting if we just want to talk about like reproductive justice for a second.
Let's do it.
That I'm just kind of baffled that it can even still be a talking point after all these years. But yeah, 50 years, and people couldn't get on the same page of like, that may not be a decision that I make for myself or a belief that I hold, but I don't get to have say so in other people's lives.
I mean, that comes down to a lot of it, right? Of we don't get to control other people. Except if you believe that you do.
But yet you want all your freedoms. Okay. Make it make sense. The math ain't mathin'. I think the politics into the culture and the dynamics and how certain narratives get amplified. And I think that technology and also political influence, I'll say political, because right now what we're seeing is influence becomes political.
Yeah.
So if you can generate influence in some capacity, whether that's through popularity, wealth, and leverage that influence for a political motive or for a personal agenda, it's very unfortunate. And it's sad to see, because it's creating harm.
As we grow in influence, as we grow in wealth, as we grow in power, those things change the structures of our brain.
Tell the truth.
And there's neuroscience research that shows the brain structures responsible for empathy start to shrink. And when you lack empathy in relationships, whether on an individual or systemic level, that changes the nature of how you engage. And you're no longer then working toward the same goals. And so other people become objects rather than humans.
Yes.
And that's where we are.
Thank you for telling the truth on that. And that's something that I have not heard anyone say openly. But I appreciate you for referencing the science of it. And I think that it's something that should really be mentioned, because people spend a lot of time spinning their wheels, like trying to understand, well, why would they do such a thing? And I don't understand. Well, when you think about it in that structure, that fundamentally you have a different brain mechanisms, different brain chemistry, and different brain functions, neurological functioning. And we're not talking about just being neuroatypical, right? That that it's not the same. And so your understanding of how someone else is operating, it's not going to line up.
Right. And that's where, when people create systems of government, typically, like the Great American Experiment, if you will, there are efforts to put checks and balances into not having monopolies, not having unchecked power, because they tend to lead to things that are harmful for the whole. And we have systematically, and not just in the last 10 years, just over a long period of time, removed a number of those safeguards. I think out of hubris, to be honest. And this is where it's leading us. And I think there's always the pull to say, this is their doing. And one of the things I've worked really hard on in my own life is saying this is our doing.
Yeah, wow.
Because to move through it, we have to all take responsibility on some level and be engaged in the solution. And as soon as they and other, we're now doing the same thing to them that they did to us. And again, that's using harm to revisit harm, and we're just tearing things down.
Yeah. One thing that I have been sharing openly is my disapproval for the ways in which oftentimes it is, if you think about it politically, whether it's coming from like a Democratic or more left-leaning voice, and sometimes it's also then layered into educational and other forms of privilege, this disrespect, and also, I'm trying to find the right word, just the talking down of people that are coming from communities, whether they are poor, whether they are rural, whether they are white, and some combination of those experiences. The talking down and using language, calling them dumb, and like, that's not helpful.
It's harmful.
Not helpful. It's and this is that, and that's also coming back to your point about the we. That's also why we're in this situation, because we have ostracized and been so mean to a group of people that I would say to many, it's not just a group of people, to many communities across this country that are really struggling. I want to see people's small towns come back to life, And I think that if we take a collective approach to that, you can't tell me that a couple of, whether it's the intersection of nonprofits and tech companies and different ideas and creative thinkers can figure out ways to bring industry to different places. And, and it may not be the industry that they used to have, but it could be an industry that allows people to stay in the homes that they grew up in, to stay in the spaces that are really meaningful and important to them, to maintain their own legacy and their own history in those spaces. And so referring to them as dumb or less than in the ways, and to talk down to them, I think that has been part of the problem.
100%. It's part of the problem. And I think, again, it's we've felt condescended to in certain ways. And so then
that's the word, condescending.
We revisit that to other people of, actually, we're better than you. And maybe none of us are better than each other. Maybe we all need each other to make this work, because I don't know about you, but I am not a self-sustaining human. I'm not growing my own food. And there are people out there who live off the grid and are fully self-sustaining. Kudos. Most of us are not that, and we need each other. We want the tech. We also want the food. We want all of these things to work, and we need everybody to make that happen. And what if we valued all of those contributions?
Yes.
And I think of that with the attack on immigration. Like, they are contributing heavily to our economy.
Heavily.
So heavily. And we need them. I value them. I want them here.
And there's enough, there's room, right?
There's room. There's resources. Room. There's enough.
but it's this zero-sum game. Like what somebody else gets, I lose.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to take it all for myself because I might need it now, or I might need it in 30 years,
or I just feel like that somebody else shouldn't have that because that's not the experience that I had.
It was hard for me, so it should be hard for everybody.
Or I'm not getting my needs met over here in what other place. Why should somebody else have an opportunity in another place?
Which gets back to your what about question.
Mm-hmm.
Is that desire to feel seen and understood. Mm-hmm. And so often we get caught up in ranking hardship. My hardship is worse than your hardship.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than being able to say like, yeah, that's hard. This is also hard. They're different hard. We don't have to rank them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is, you had sort of asked this question about like the empathy. So what gets in the way of empathy? And I'm just going to say that this is very revealing. I would say that it's trauma.
Amen. We're all walking around as bundles of trauma, revisiting trauma on other people. Mm-hmm. And here we go.
Yep. You also mentioned, the difference of, and sort of the transition of power and influence on brain chemistry and the neurology there. That's another factor. There's multiple factors. I'm just kind of pointing them out again as we talked about it, because I feel like they're all important to like kind of understand this question of like,
we are so complicated.
Why are we having such a hard time at this? Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, let's talk about growth mindset, shall we?
All right, let's bring it back.
But to bring that back, I think we don't move forward with any of this unless we learn how to do things differently. Mm-hmm. And so much of psychology, individual or systems, is we're in a system, we're doing something that isn't working. How do we change to do something that maybe moves us toward our goals?
Right.
Which involves identifying goals and then a pathway. And that's where I think your work around growth mindset might even give me and listeners some areas for hope of like, where do we go from here?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll say you would probably be best suited to give like a quick ChatGPT definition of growth mindset.
So the way I kind of use it from practicing failure is, how do we take everything as data? So rather than getting mired in shame and drawing conclusions about things that don't work, about like, I'm a terrible person, nobody wants to be friends with me, everyone's going to cancel me, these fears that kind of drive us, then we use the tenets of CBT of like stepping into our anxiety in ways that are measured and intentional so that we can have wins. As we try these things, and it's important to set them up. So like, I want to try public speaking. I'm not going to go speak to 1,000 people the first time.
Yeah.
I might try speaking in front of a handful of friends, set myself up for success.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say there's also this interpretation of results. And I think that's a big part of growth mindset.
Say more.
So how do I interpret the outcomes, right? So when we are navigating the world based on inputs and outcomes, inputs and outputs, right? So usually our input is our own energy, our effort. And the output that we're looking for is some metric of success. Mm-hmm. So when the outputs don't match the inputs, we interpret that as failure.
Ooh, I love this.
Interpret that as failure. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes our expectations of the output is not reasonable or fair to ourselves.
Yes.
I want to do this public speaking so I can be famous like Tony Robbins. Oh, okay. That was a long process to get there.
Yeah, a lot of practice. So what are we expecting from whether we're trying a new thing, especially when we're trying a new thing or we're trying something that is not our area of expertise, right? And to approach that with something else that we talk a lot about in psychology is with a beginner's mind, right? And I think that sometimes we have to really, I have two really powerful like lived experiences around growth mindset. One academically and professionally. And I made was giving this presentation or doing a little talking session, and I had made some slides, and I had this spelling error. Actually, now I can't remember what word it was, but I had this spelling error in the slides. And I work in academic medicine, and so everybody else around me is like MDs and like, you know, all of these like esteemed professionals. And I'm looking at the audience, and I'm like, what are they looking at? Like, because of course it's psychology. Like, I am a psychologist, so I was like,
and you're getting that nonverbal feedback that something's happening.
And I'm like, there's something happening. They're distracted by something. So at some point, like, I turned the slides off, and I was just talking it through. And one of the faculty members, he came up to me. He was like, you know, you did a great job. But I just want to let you know, you had a spelling error in your slides. And I was like, oh, well, when I like did some little like,
it's no big deal.
Yeah, I just kind of tried to dance it up, and I made this joke, which is just as true. Like, I'm not a great speller, and I told him this story about how when I was in kindergarten, I misspelled the word. I don't know if I told him this whole story, but when I was in kindergarten, in the little big, those painting. It wasn't finger paint, but it was, we had like corner. 3 primary colors, and it was red, blue, and yellow or whatever. And I had misspelled the word book, and I wrote book, B-O-O-C-K. And for some reason, these kindergarten teachers, like, they thought it was the funniest thing ever, and they were just cracking up about the way that I spelled book.
That seems really normal for kindergartner to spell that way.
I don't know, but they were laughing. They were cracking. When I say cracking up, they were cracking up. They were having a whole little moment. And I remember like getting like really like, oh, like why are they laughing at me? And then I kind of, I can understand it, even that I wasn't like super offended, but I was just like, why are they laughing at me? And I use it as sort of like one of these encounter acre moments. I'm like, oh, this is why I'm a bad speller, like, oh, my spelling was made fun of when I was such a child, and I never really learned how to spell, right? And so I made this joke, and then he says, yeah, but you did it twice. And then I was just like, dun dun dun.
That's a real like, no, do feel shame in this moment.
However, so when I went home, I had a dog at the time. You remember the dog. Anyway, and I remember it was late at night, and I'm like dragging the dog around the park like, in these circles. And the dog, at this point, my dog Pendleton, he's like, Mom, like, what? Are we done out here? Like, what's going on? Like,
I've gone to the bathroom. Take me home.
Thanks for the walk and all, but like, I think it's time to go back, right? And I just remember like just trying to like walk through all the stress and anxiety, and like I was like, oh my god, I embarrassed myself. You know the track of like, I'm so dumb, I'm so stupid, I embarrassed myself. How could I ever think that I could like be in a space with like all of these other esteemed professionals? Like, they're the doctors, I'm not a real doctor. All the ways in which you could go. But we are trained, and I somehow I was able to lean on my training and come to it, and I said to myself, LaMisha, what's one way, as we do, what's one way that you can interpret a situation? You're interpreting it this way, right? That this person, gave you this feedback, and, now you should feel stupid. Not that he was trying to make you feel stupid. Now you feel stupid. What's another way that you can interpret the feedback? And I thought, well, maybe he was trying to help me grow.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's trying to help me do better.
Or maybe he was saying, if you fix it on this slide, make sure you know that there's another one, right, so you can fix them both.
Maybe he's trying to help me grow. Maybe he's trying to help me do better. And is that interpretation going to be more helpful to me?
Yes.
Which interpretation? There's many. I could probably find 3 or 4 interpretations. Which one is going to be most helpful to me?
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, if I interpret it that he was trying to be a mentor, trying to be helpful, because it was a mentoring workshop, it was a mentoring thing. I was like, then that's the more helpful one, mm-hmm. right? And it was like I was instantly able to just take the needle off the track, as I kind of talk about it, and just, all right, we're done with this. We're not gonna think about it as I'm dumb and not good enough and an idiot and all the negative comments.
Because we also tend to think that, well, he said this and now he's going to remember me forever as the terrible speller.
Yeah, well, And part of that interpretation is, I think he does remember me. And many years after, like, I'll walk past him today and he'd be like, hey, give me a hug, like, he's a very kind man.
But he remembered you positively.
Yes.
Not with shame.
Not with shame. Because if I had allowed myself to sit in that shame, I would have avoided him.
Yep.
Forever. I would have never have this fond memory of, like, him being this, like, loving educator.
That's beautiful.
And that's really what he is. Like, he's trying to be helpful, So that's one example. And so I think the interpretation, we talk about growth mindset, the interpretation and the opportunity and especially in as this bigger conversation that we were having just about life and these challenges that we encounter. I would say the growth mindset part here is that in whatever ways, for good or for complexity or for the circle of life, I would say life is a lot like a spiral staircase. And we're going to find ourselves going around what feels like a very similar experience.
We revisit themes all the time.
Yes, all the time.
I picture that as like building a flower. We keep coming back to kind of the center. But I like staircase because it brings growth.
It brings the growth.
Yeah.
So when I go around, and so if I stayed on the same level, I would just be going in a circle, right? But if I add that insight, and if I think about it from a place of growth mindset, and if I think about, well, what is the opportunity for me to try a different pathway, to try a different solution, to approach it from a different place, might I be able to elevate in that staircase?
Just take one step up.
Right. Might I be able to ascend? And so there's an ascendance around the revisiting of themes.
I love it.
So we as a collective, right? We are in a collective. We were in this collective during COVID, and that's very interesting that I would say that was the first time in my adulthood that I'd ever really felt. No, I'll take it back. Because I would say 9/11 was another collective.
That was a very collective.
A collective experience. I would say 9/11, a very collective experience. It was also an invitation and opportunity, which I think we missed. COVID, another collective experience. I don't know if people got the message. Because I think that a lot of people just tuned out. It's like, you take your stimulus check, remote work. But there's a lot of people that were struggling, the learners that were...
That's again like coming back to that trauma piece.
Yep. And either you're in your own experience or thinking about other people's experiences. Are you tuning in? And so here's another one. Here's another collective experience. What is the collective opportunity for us to work together to get out of that us versus them binary?
Yeah. I will say people are more easily controllable when they're in the binary.
Well, it's simplified. And I think that is a way, there's a both and, because I would say that the truth of the matter is that, being a critical thinker is something that you learn in many different ways. Whether it is through education, through professional work,
through lived experience.
Through lived experiences and upbringings. And the approach of media and the shortening of the attention span with social media and reels and other things, people really have to know that there's a danger to that. And there's a cost to that.
That we are actually vulnerable when we're in those spaces.
Yes. And you talk about the neuro part of it, of like, what are you doing to your brain, in those ways? But I would say that positioning things in a binary has always been an easy way, and it's a very base level. We are socialized from early childhood, right? Which team are you on, right? And then if you make it a sport, if you make it a game, right? The gamifying.
So what if we gamify politics?
It is already gamified, and you see where we are with that. Yep. Who won, who lost? It's like, well, we all lost, okay? Like,
we are
that's
all
really,
losing, yeah.
We are all losing. Humanity is losing, okay? That's what's happening. But if you want to think that because you picked a certain color, that you're a winner, and that makes you feel good, because it does,
it
right?
does. It's rewarding.
It does. It's reward, and you're tapping into these reward centers based on this really primary, foundational aspect of human nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that's being exploited.
Yes, it is. And so coming back to this growth mindset,
mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I went with practicing failure as the name is because I think often in psychology, we want to move away from words that feel judgmental, and failure feels very judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
But that what if we get just used to it, that it's okay not being amazing and not always winning?
I think that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that takes time. And it feels like a luxury that some people get and others do not.
Yeah.
I think about my own professional journey and, coming into the opportunity to be, your intern, co-intern with you and with Brooke. That was a point of failure in my life. It's this first point of failure for folks. I want to always invite for you to ask the people that you are looking to and saying like, oh, like I'd love to be where they are one day, or oh, like it looks like they have it all figured out. Like I would invite you to really ask them when you get a chance, like what did they overcome and what did they fail at? Because it's probably going to be paramount to who and where they are in that moment.
For sure. And that's why I kind of always end this podcast with asking people about a point of failure that they worked through or working through the fear of failure.
I just want to just broadly answer the question, which is that when I think about these really pivotal moments in my life where I failed, I'll say first time I didn't get into the college that I wanted to. And I was deeply depressed, like quit the track team, stayed in bed. Like my mom didn't even wake me up for like a week. It was just like,
it's devastating.
Devastated.
Because that's the whole future you had mapped out for yourself is gone.
Right. Or, I mean, a lot of it is just ego. I'll just be honest. It's just ego. But when I think that, okay, so that moment, like I didn't get into Northwestern and I got waitlisted at Dartmouth and I ended up at Loyola and I just thought like, my ego was just so hurt that like I didn't get to go to a better school or whatever the case may be. And I learned so much those years. Like those were like the best in terms of personal growth and development. I would not be who I am. Like it all is this really big stepping stone. And so not matching for internship, another like real, and what happens in failure, you're absolutely right, which is shame, right? This is shame, right? And that being this like pivotal time in my life where like something good is going to happen for you and you're going to grow in a way that you didn't know and you didn't expect and you couldn't have anticipated, right? All along the ways. And then I would say most recently, I haven't had one of those sort of giant life failure things occur. But I will say in the small, I'm not afraid of the small things anymore.
Yeah. It gives you different perspective.
Yeah, like I was rereading this email I sent and I was like, oh God, like, when you write like 3 sentences and then you're trying to like stitch them back together. And I was like,
you spend an hour editing 3 sentences.
And then you're like, and then you read it after you send it and you're like, what the hell did I write? Like this person like was very gracious and but it's like, did I mull over the fact that like I flubbed this email all up to hell and back? No, I was just like, oh, let me just edit it again and, fix it and move forward, right? Like, there's things that, like, I don't even think about anymore. Like, oh, yeah, I messed that up. Whoop-de-woo. Like, we'll fix it and move forward. It's not a big deal.
I used to respond to those smaller errors in my life as though they were, like, not getting into
crisis.
Huge. And even at the time, I would understand like this is not congruent with what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But it really, I had to kind of crack into that growth mindset before I could start moving past them and just be like, oh yeah, that was a failure. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's a part of this. That's also part of what makes us human. And it's often what we relate to in other people. Like that's the point of connection.
Yeah.
It's hard to be friends with somebody who never makes mistakes.
Right. Yeah. I don't really, that's a good point. And I was having an interaction with a really good friend, just yesterday. And I would say that coming back to your point around empathy, that it's also an invitation to be, I would say, more empathetic to the places that people interpret failure in their lives. You may not see it as failure, but they might have great sensitivity around it.
But understanding that they are feeling this as a point of failure.
Yes.
And so how do we treat that with grace and kindness?
And kindness and compassion and patience, yes.
Because when people have responded to me with that grace and kindness, those are the points where I really found myself learning and being able to move past some of those long-held patterns.
Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. So I would say that failure is just one of the best growth opportunities. Mm-hmm. I wish that there was another word in the English language that we could describe these moments where it's not just that things don't go your way or that you fall. Like it's this combination of those things, because sometimes things just don't work out. And sometimes you actively contribute to your demise.
Yes.
Sometimes it's because of you and you got to take some accountability there. You're like, oh God, like, I messed this up, whether it was intentional or I was just not thinking straight or not thinking deeply enough. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's this combination of like failure, mistakes, big mistakes. Mm-hmm. As like just these great, it's not just character building. It's not, you can see the smile. It's because it's transformative. And that's what I'm so excited about.
Because you either have to find a way to live with it and move forward with it. Yeah. Or you crumble underneath it and it defines your life.
Perhaps. Yeah. I think that I'm just sitting in like the gift of the gratitude, like I'm so grateful. I've never said that, but I'm really, really grateful for those experiences and just I'm excited about for others in this way to like have that transformation and to manifest something out of a space.
Yeah, my biggest points of growth are from these like most painful things.
Yeah. And to have agency in that, right? And it's not just this life like, it all worked out and, something else, but for you as an individual to see how you can then get into yourself, get into life, put your hands around it, be a part of it and shape it.
Mm-hmm. This is the hand I was dealt and I got to figure out how to play it.
Yes, and to shape it, like you get to do it and to learn that you have agency in that. It's so powerful. Mm-hmm. So that's my wish, that's my hope, that's my prayer for folks, along with what we talked about, being in the collective. That was a very good reminder. I thank you for this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I want to say I'm very grateful that you had that point of failure with internship because that brought you into my life and I don't know that I would have come across you otherwise. And you've been a transformative piece of like my own growth and learning professionally and personally. Yeah. So,
and when I tell people, stories of what allyship looks like, I always reference you.
Oh,
so know that you're there.
I can't.
That's true.
I can't take that in. Yeah.
Receive it.
I will sit with it. Thank you. Yeah. That internship brought some fire.
It was a tough year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a tough year, but that's how you grow.
That's how you grow. And shout out to Brooke, who was there with us and a part of it. Brooke. And hope she and her kids are doing well. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. LaMisha, this has been a big conversation. We have tackled things that humanity is not going to solve, and we're not going to solve, but we're in it together.
We can.
If we work together, yeah. And we are okay with hard. But when we want easy, it's never going to be easy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And when you want easy, you're absolutely right. When you want to distill something that's multidimensional into a two-dimensional space so that you can pick A or B, or be given no option at all and feel like somebody else's decision for you is good. All right, we gotta stop.
So we choose hard, and we're gonna do it together.
We're gonna do it together. Yes.
All right. So if people would like to work with you or learn more about what you do, how can they find you?
You can find me on my website, drlamishahill.com. Send me a ping, and I will get it.
And I will say, like, if you have any needs in your organization, please hire Dr. Hillweller. Like, she does amazing things.
Wow, thank you.
So,
thank you. I love working with new teams. It's always so exciting and fun. And when I tell them that, they're like, "You really like this?" I was like, "Oh my goodness, it's so exciting!"
Yeah.
To getting to be a part of something else. So,
means you're doing the right work. Yeah. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for...
Of course. Thank you for having me. Thank you for thinking of
going
me.
into these hard spaces. I know it can be very scary. At least it is for me. I won't project that on you.
That's another emotion we got to add to the list.
Yeah.
Huh? Fear. Okay, we didn't talk about that one.
Another day. All right. Thank you to everyone who listened. Remember that failure is a necessary part of growth. So keep failing, keep learning, keep growing. Special thank you to everyone who contributed to this project. Consulting producer and editor, July Diaz. Producer and graphic designer, Ben Castle. Logo art by Josie Huang. Theme music by Daniel Rogers.